Hey guys, it's Dr. Hayes, and this is the video about avoiding plagiarism a topic we're talking about along with while we're talking about incorporating information from your sources and your research into your essays. This topic goes along with that, and it is something that will come up again and again in every class you take, trying to avoid getting in trouble or accused of trying to plagiarize a homework assignment or a portion of a test or an essay. And a lot of people who get accused of plagiarism, it is unintentional. They weren't trying to plagiarize, they weren't trying to commit a violation, but they weren't really sure about how to cite things properly, or they weren't really sure what counted as inappropriate or in a violation, so they get in trouble. And so that's not something that I want you guys to endure or to have to face. So today, this video, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what intellectual property is and why we care about preserving it and how to avoid accidentally stealing someone's intellectual property. And then I will take you through the process, just sort of abstractly, a little bit of how our university handles it if you are sort of accused of plagiarizing, and what will happen and what your rights are. So first I want to talk about the idea of intellectual property. And so plagiarism, a lot of students don't understand why it's so serious, and this seems to come up a lot, especially with when we have students, international students who come here from other countries. That seems to be even more of a misunderstanding or a lack of understanding as to why intellectual property and plagiarism is so important. I don't know, I think it's maybe a cultural thing, but even in our country, there's something about the importance and the gravity of how serious it is to steal someone else's intellectual property that doesn't quite always click with students, especially when you're first starting your college career. So intellectual property is called that. It's just, like the word property is something that belongs to someone else. They own it, either because they bought it or they made it or it was given to them, something that someone owns. And if you take something that belongs to someone else, if you steal someone's property, that's bad. That's theft. You can get in trouble for that. It's illegal. You can get fined. You can, if it's a big enough offense, you can have jail time. There's all these problems about taking something that belongs to someone else. And so when it's a physical thing that we can actually see, like a bike or a car or a piece of jewelry or something like that, then it's easy for us to say, oh yeah, that's stealing. But the concept of intellectual property is things that you can't necessarily see or hold in your hand. It's something that belongs to someone that came out of their mind. So their ideas, their actual words, images that they've created, like photography or artwork or films, things like that, all of those, any kind of work of art, any kind of essay, any kind of article, even if in a magazine or an academic article, the content on a website, anything you could possibly think of that a human individual thought up in their mind and created something from it, that is intellectual property. And so if you use someone else's intellectual property or take it from them or borrow it is more accurate to what you'd be doing with the paper. If you borrow somebody else's ideas and they didn't come from your mind, it's not your intellectual property, it's somebody else's, that's a big no-no. We don't do that in the academic world, and you can get into some serious trouble depending on how serious of a violation you do. A lot of students think that in order for it to count as real true plagiarism, then it has to be word for word, like you copy and paste the text, like maybe from another article or a website or a book or something like that. And that does count as plagiarism, but it doesn't have to be word for word. It can be someone else's ideas, and you don't cite them or give them credit, that also counts as intellectual, theft. You might reword the way that they worded it. You might say it in a different way. We talked in class about paraphrasing, and even if a paraphrase is too close, or if you completely reword somebody else's information and ideas, but then you don't cite, the passage, if you don't cite the paraphrase, that's still plagiarism. That's still not giving someone credit for an idea or information that they have and provided and that you didn't. So we're all about learning how to give credit, and that's one of the main purposes that you're taking this class, is learning how to give credit where credit's due. And sort of a higher order thinking skill is synthesis, where you can take what person A says and what person B says, and you can combine them together and then add your own opinion about it, and you have synthesized, you have joined together multiple perspectives from different places and then added your interpretation. That's synthesis. That's a higher order thinking skill. And so we encourage you to interact with other voices and voices from other places and other ideas that people have had. But you have to track, your work. You have to cite your sources and give credit where it's due. So that's the concept of intellectual property and why it's so important. We consider it in academia, in the scholarly world. Plagiarism, intellectual theft, is just as serious as if you took someone's necklace, or if you stole something out of their car or out of their home. It's something that belongs to them and you took it. So that's kind of why we're talking about this. So let's talk about what counts as plagiarism. So I'm going to actually pull up, you can't see. I'm going to pull up. I should have had this pulled up already. But the Cumberland has a chart that shows all the different kinds of violations that we have. And what counts. So if you are accused of plagiarism by a professor, then they are going to cite it as like a type 1 violation, type 2 violation. They will, it's, like a certain kind. It's a certain level, just depending on what you've done. Yes, this is what I want to open, but why won't it? Give me a second. Here we go. This is what I'm trying to open, this chart. And so they will, usually most violations that will happen are just the level 1, just the most basic one, and they're pretty minor. Usually, there isn't a lot of penalty. I don't know why this isn't opening. Just trying. There's not a lot of penalty for committing a type 1 violation. It's just usually a slap on the wrist. You get a warning. You might either fail the assignment that you've been given the violation on, or you might be told to redo it, or you might be given an alternative assignment. All of those are possibilities. And so that's what probably most plagiarism accusations are. Level 1, just the most basic. A paragraph was not paraphrased fully, or there was one little section of a paper that was quoted from somewhere and not given credit. And so a lot of students ask, well, what's even the point of even putting those on my record? What's even the point of those, violations if they're so minor? So here we go. Finally opened. Well, the point is, see, these level 1s. Here's the chart that the school uses. So the point of the prosecuting all levels of plagiarism violations is that usually if a very minor plagiarism takes place and is not addressed and is not punished or sanctioned, is what it's called, then what happens is you have a student who commits a very minor level 1 violation in a class. And they pretty much either get away with it, or the teacher's like, dude, don't do that. And they just make them redo it, or they take off some credit. They're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And so then their next class, they do it again, and they do another level 1 violation. They're like, oh, well, okay. So this is actually helping me. I can kind of cut corners in classes, and it's not that big of a deal. And so then you have a student who sort of builds up a habit of every class they're in, or maybe even every project that they work on, or every essay they write, a little bit of it is plagiarized. A little bit of it, they are a little bit lazy and they cut corners. And so it becomes this sort of habit. Their MO becomes that they do just a little bit of cheating each time. And then usually it will escalate, and they'll get a little bit more bold, and they'll copy a little bit more each time. So then it's going to eventually get to where they try it for the wrong professor who's really strict about that kind of thing. Or they try it for, they try something a little bit more bold, a little bit more serious, because they didn't really get in trouble for the minor thing. So they try something a little bit more serious. And then they end up failing a class, or, and it becomes more of a permanent thing. If really, really serious violations can end up, you can be kicked out of school for the semester. And then if you do it again, you're kicked out forever. So I mean, there's some serious repercussions. So I wanted to kind of take you through some of these levels and show why, we try to report all the minor stuff as much as we can, so that it nips it in the bud and doesn't escalate into major violations. So level 1, I'm not going to read all of this text to you, but just some examples of these level 1s. So these are the ones that people usually do accidentally, like they weren't really sure how to do it, or they weren't intending to plagiarize, they just didn't know any better. That's why you're in the class that you're in, where I've gone over how to paraphrase correctly, and we're going to go over how to quote from sources directly, and how to punctuate it properly, and you're having this video. So we're trying to avoid any of these inadvertent accidental plagiarisms, because you won't have a really excuse not to know. Let's see. Often characterized by the absence of dishonest intent. So it's not intentional. Generally quite limited in extent, occur in a minor assignment, represent a small fraction of the total coursework. So here's some examples. Working with another student on a minor laboratory exercise or homework assignment. So this is one that a lot of students do and they don't realize, where maybe like for this class you have a reading response to do, or an exercise or an activity at the end of the chapter sometimes. If you and a classmate, if you let a classmate copy off of your paper, or if you copy off of somebody else's paper, you have to do all your own work for your reading responses. You can't copy off someone else's answers. And if your answers are exactly the same as somebody else's, or if your reading response is almost exactly the same as someone else's, I'm gonna notice that. I've had that happen in this class before, where somebody let one guy did his reading response, then he sent the Google Doc link to his buddy, and his buddy just went in and changed his name to his name and added just a couple lines to the end, and then turned the same thing in. Well, it read word for word, so he submitted it as a Google Doc, not like a file on Canvas. So I went in and I could go through and track all the changes. I could see where he changed his name and see where, he just added a couple lines. So they got in trouble for that. And so that's something I'll mention here, is that if you are the person who's letting someone copy your work, like if you gave it to them to copy, it's your buddy, your roommate, somebody on your team, and you let them copy it, you get in trouble also. It's not only the person who did the copying who gets in trouble, but the person who had the original homework and let them copy their homework, they also get in trouble. So both of those people got in trouble. That's something where you work together on something you're not supposed to work together on. Or if you fail to footnote or give a proper acknowledgement of a very limited section of assignment. So if you leave a citation out, if you leave, if you don't cite like maybe one quotation in your paper, or maybe there's one paragraph that is clearly from somewhere else, like turn it in, flags it, or the professor notices that it doesn't sound like you. When they read it, because we can tell, like those of us who teach composition classes, when we're reading through, we can tell, and I've read your reading responses by now, so I can tell if it doesn't sound like something you wrote. And so if it's discovered that maybe a whole paragraph was a little bit too close, copied a little bit too closely from somewhere online, then that's a minor violation. So the sanctions for this one, the punishment for this is, like I said a while ago, usually it talks about participating in a workshop about ethic. I don't know that we really have that, but usually, this is the ones right here. Either a makeup assignment that's more, like, a little bit harder than the original, or you get no credit for that assignment. So, like, it's usually something like a homework grade or a minor grade, and you just don't get credit for it. And you get a warning, so there's not official action. That's if it's your first offense. If you do that multiple times, so this is why, again, even the very minor things we try to make a file for, because say you do it for me just on like a reading response, you plagiarize a reading response, well then you might do it in another class on a minor assignment, you might do it in another class on a minor assignment. All of those add up to a repeat violations, and so the sanctions are a little bit more serious. So yeah, most occurrences of plagiarism are these level 1, very minor. Usually if I notice it, I'll usually, for the first time, I'll give the student a chance to kind of, fix this, resubmit, that kind of a thing. Level 2, let me scroll up to that one. Level 2 violations are a little bit more serious. Usually the assignment is bigger, like instead of a homework assignment or a reading response, it's like an actual essay. So it's maybe a more serious assignment or project, and then the extent to which the copying has been done is more pervasive throughout the assignment. So quoting directly or paraphrasing to a moderate extent, rather than just minimal, it's moderate. This is one that a lot of people don't understand is also a no-no. Submitting the same work or major portions of the work to satisfy the requirements of more than one course without permission from the instructor. So if you say, for me, you're writing a paper about body mass index for the nutrition section of the class, and then maybe you take a biology class and you have to pick a nutritional topic to write a paper about, and so you submit pretty much the same project about body mass index in that class, and you don't do new work for that professor, that's a violation. You can't do that. You can't submit the same work for more than one class. Note that it says without the professor's permission. So you might go to your professor and say, I did a project on body mass index last year, and it would really actually apply to this assignment. Can I use some of that information? So your professor sometimes will say, no, I'd prefer you to do fresh work for me. And if they say that, then you just accept that as the answer. But some professors might say, that's actually fine if you want to continue your research on body mass index and maybe add, I want some fresh sources, I want some fresh work. And they might request that you turn in the original paper that you wrote for me along with the new one that you write for them, so they can verify that enough new material and new work has been done. But if you just do it as thinking, oh man, this is easy, work smarter, not harder, get 2 birds with 1 stone. Yeah, if you're caught, that's a level 2 violation. Let me scroll down and see some other examples. For science, using data or interpretive material from a laboratory report without acknowledging the source. Let's see. A failure to acknowledge assistance from others, such as help with research, statistical analysis, computer programming, data collection, anything like that. If you got help, if you outsourced some of your, say it was a field collection for a survey or report you're doing, or if it's a lab experiment you're doing, if you got someone to come in and help do it for you and you didn't acknowledge their input and the use of their help, if that's something you'd have to talk to your science professors about. I'm not, I'm an English teacher, so I'm not super familiar with how what the requirements for like lab reporting and collaboration are. So that's something you'd have to talk to about with them, but that could constitute a level 2 violation. So some sanctions for that is you fail on the assignment, just like in the level 1, you fail the assignment, but a failing grade on a level 2 violation is usually a little more serious because the assignment is a bigger assignment. It's a more of a major, and it's a bigger part of your grade. You might have be given a makeup assignment that is more difficult, so it can, instead of failing the assignment, you might be given an alternative assignment that's more rigorous, and so it's harder to get a good grade. Voiding credit for the original assignment and supplementing with another assignment. That's the same thing. And then a warning. And disciplinary action wise, you get a warning. So there's nothing officially on your like transcript that would show cheating or discipline. It would just be a warning. Now there's levels 3 and 4. These are major violations. These are pretty rare, but if they happen, if it happens to you, you don't want this to happen. So a level 3 violation and level 4, basically, your professor at this point could fail you in the course. You would get this designation right here. I don't know if you can see it. FC, failure due to cheating. So you would not just get an F on your transcript that failed the course. Your transcript grade would say FC, which means failure from cheating. And so that's on your permanent transcript, your permanent record. So these are serious, right? These are serious offenses. So some examples are, repeating several instances of level 2 violations, presenting the work of another one as your own, like an entire paper, an entire exam is, you've got it from someone else. And maybe someone from online, someone else in another class, someone who took the class before. And it's a major assignment, and the whole entire thing somebody else did, and you put your name on it, and you're saying it's yours. Copying work on an exam. So like if you cheat off of somebody else in a test, like in the room, that is a major violation. Plagiarizing major portions of a written assignment, which, we already talked about that. Acting to facilitate copying during an exam. So if you help someone copy your test during an exam, it's also a major violation. Using prohibited materials such as books, notes, or calculators during an exam. So like if you have like a cheat sheet or, notes written, on your palm, or, you've seen them with the masks where they have notes on the inside. There's memes about that. So if you have materials that aren't allowed during the exam. Altering an exam for purposes of regrading. So if you try to sabotage the results of an exam so that the exam has to be thrown out, like if you try to sabotage it in that way, that's a violation if you're caught. Acquiring or distributing copies of an exam before the exam period, that's like a movie plot. They sneak into the office and steal the exam or steal the answers or whatever. Submitting purchased materials such as a term paper. You can buy papers online. And that's what that's talking about. Removing or damaging posted or reserved material, or preventing other students from having access to the material. This is more of like a lab exam. Fabricating data by inventing or deliberately altering material. So you lie about you include made up sources that don't exist. That's one. Using unethical or improper means of acquiring data. I'm not really even 100% sure what unethical means of acquiring data, but I think that's more like a scientific study if you were unethical about getting your results. So as I said, the sanctions for level 3 is an FC in the course. It looks like, so if the term ends and if it's still being sort of investigated, you can get an incomplete, and it might get sort of reversed. So if you're already on probation and another violation happens, you'll be suspended from school for the semester. So that's what that's saying. Again, I'm not going to read the whole thing. And then level 4, it seems like how could it get any worse, right? So level 4 is let's see. So usually it's if you have already had a lesser violation and then you come and you do it again, that would count as level 4. If you have a lack of, or if you have a academic integrity violation that breaks the law, like the big world law, not just campus law, but breaks the law, like, forging grades, stealing from breaking and entering, buying a stolen exam, falsifying a transcript. So if you change your transcript, like those are legal documents, you can't change those. These are pretty serious. Like I've never heard of anything like this except for like in the movies. Have someone else come in and take your exam for you. That's hard to do in Cumberland because the classes are so small. But if you were online and you were taking a class online and someone else, took the test for you, and then this talks about falsifying data, and then it says if it'll be level 4 if it's a big project like a master's thesis, a dissertation, your like senior project, an article that you're submitting for publication, like if it's a bigger assignment. Level 4 sanctions are pretty much the same as level 3. But it's, you can fail the course and all, but if it's serious enough, you will get permanent expulsion from the university with a permanent notification of disciplinary expulsion on your record, on the transcript. And so that would be the one other level of violation that is added if you get in that much trouble. So this is kind of scary, and I mean, the point is, there's a lot of we take it seriously. Most of you, if you ever get yourself into this hot water, you'll be up here in level 1, maybe level 2. Cheating on a minor assignment like homework, or cheating, maybe even accidentally, on a major assignment like an essay or presentation. So we don't want that to happen. So that's why we're going through all of this stuff, so that you can kind of know that we as a university community are on the lookout for this kind of thing, and that there is a system in place to identify it and record it and punish it if need be. One other thing I was going to show you is this right here. This is what employees are given. I'm trying to put my camera in a place where it's not going to block your view. Faculty are given this procedure for academic integrity. This is what will happen. We will identify what kind of violation occurred. We talked about some of these just now. Duplicating a test, collaborating when you're not supposed to, misrepresentation of a source, plagiarism, all these kind of things. Then we have to gather evidence and document it. So that includes screenshots, photocopies of a text, emails, photocopies of like the text of an essay. I mean, not like a text. And reports from Turnitin, like if it has like a percentage amount. Sometimes documentation will include like witness reports and things if somebody witnessed it. And then, so we will gather up all of our evidence and start filling out a report. So then the next step is we will determine which level has been violated and complete the form. And this talks about the levels that I just told you about. So I'll skip past that. The next phase that will happen is that your professor will probably contact you and say, listen, this has happened. There's been a Turnitin percentage, or there's been, I have found evidence that there's been an academic integrity in violation. I need you to meet with me, or we need to have a conversation. I need to show you what I found, whatever. And then, so it might end up just being a conversation. If it's a small part that the professor feels like is an accident, like I said, usually if it's a student's first time and it's real minor, I'll usually point it out and give them a chance to redo it and resubmit. And so that's where this is determine if the violation is going to be pursued further. If it is, then that's where you, there's a form. So there's an academic integrity violation form that any professor who's wanting to go further and pursue a sanction will show it to you and fill it out. And then the student is given 24 hours to fill out to consider and contemplate the accusation and the evidence presented and to come back. And so the 24 hours it's supposed to protect you and the professor. So the student doesn't feel like they're cornered in a professor's office and then sort of coerced into signing a confession or something like that. It gives you a chance to go and look back and find your own evidence and to think about your response when the initial shock is over, and basically so you don't feel like you were forced into signing. So this something you need to know, though. Signing the form does not mean that you agree to your guilt. It just means, yes, I have been shown the evidence. I acknowledge the validity of the evidence shown. I don't think it was made up or whatever. And so you sign that, you have been shown all of the form and the evidence, and you understand that things will proceed. So the final step is we will write up a narrative of the whole incident, our meeting with you, everything. There's a whole write-up we have to do. We get the signature, and then remind you that the signature merely acknowledges you've reviewed the document. And then here's the thing. You have a right to appeal. Like, if you agree, like, yep, I did it. I was scared. It was due. I ran out of time. I panicked. And I didn't want to have it late or get a bad grade, so I panicked and copied some stuff. If you acknowledge, the evidence is there in black and white, nothing you can do about it, no use denying it, and you acknowledge that, then you can just kind of accept the sanction that's issued, whether it be the 0 on the assignment, or even if it's a failure in the class, if it's that serious. However, you have the right to appeal. There's an appeal process with academic affairs. And so we have an academic integrity board. And let's back up. So the academic integrity board is made up of, I think, at least 4 members of the faculty from various departments. And then there's always one student who's on the academic integrity board. And they are there to be an advocate for a student who's being, not really on trial. That's not really the right word, but the student who's appealing, their decision. So if you want to appeal, there's a form you can request the form. I think it's in the handbook, the student handbook. In the student handbook, the first section of the student handbook is academic integrity violations, and it goes through all this information. And so there's a form there for an appeal. So if you want to appeal, you're like, you know what? I don't necessarily agree with this decision, or you either feel like you were wrongfully accused, or you can feel like, yes, I know I did do this, but the punishment being given is too severe, especially for my first time and for the level of violation that occurred. I think the punishment is too severe. I don't think I've earned an FC. I think I've earned maybe a failure of the assignment, but not an FC. So you maybe want to appeal the sanction. You want to appeal the punishment. Both of those things, you have a right to appeal. So you will, within, I think, 5 days, they have only 5 days to, they have to hear your case. They won't let it drag and drag and drag. So if you fill out the appeal form, within 5 days, there will be a meeting of the Academic Integrity Board, and it will be at least 4 faculty members from different departments who review the evidence. The faculty, the professor who is accusing you will be there, and then you will have a student representative who is elected, usually an upperclassman who's like a presidential advisor or somebody, who is there to represent your case, who's basically there for your benefit and to make sure that your rights aren't violated, and so that you're not being ganged up on. They have your interests. in mind, kind of like a public defender in law or whatever. And so there's a meeting where you're able to state your case. You're able to cite, hey, look, this is the chart of what the sanctions are. This is clearly the kind of violation that I did, and I'll own that. But the sanction says that I should get a failure of the assignment, but I've been given an FC, and I don't think that that's appropriate. So you have a chance if you feel like you're being wrongfully treated in your plagiarism accusation. You have a chance to appeal, and maybe get it reduced and save yourself a little bit of punishment. Something else. The last thing I'll mention is that if a professor accuses you of plagiarism, just know that it's their job. They're not maliciously trying to torture you. They're not trying to attack you. They're really trying to save you from future infractions while also preserving the academic integrity of the university and the work that the other students are doing honestly. And faculty are encouraged, if they are in the active process of an academic integrity case with a student, you are still have every right to interact with the class fully, to attend class, to turn in other assignments, to get feedback and help and ask questions from your professor, to participate in group work and group presentations and assignments. You are not like on hold and suspended from the class until, just because of this one, until the violation is fixed. You are still a, full member of the class going forward, even after this one violation, and even if it's in process of being appealed. Your professor will and should treat you professionally, even during that time. And if they don't, then that can even be something that comes up in your academic integrity appeal if you do that. So I don't want this to be something that you're afraid of. I mean, it should be, because you don't want to get in trouble at school. Obviously, you don't want to have this be something that chases you and be in your record. But we want you to be the best, the best students that you can be after you graduate. And so keeping our students honest is part of our job, and it helps elevate the level of scholarship that all the students do throughout all the classes. It keeps everybody accountable to be on the up and up, and to be honest, and to do all the work and not to skip steps. So anyway, that's all the information that I have to give you and to show you about academic integrity. I am going to put a copy of that chart that I showed you. I'll put a copy of that in the files section on Canvas. So if you want to look back at it again, or download and keep a copy on your laptop or whatever, you can do that. And so you can have that if you ever need to refer to it, even after this class. I guess that's all I've got. If you have other questions or anything like that, always, feel like you can get in touch with me. But until then, have a good week, and I will talk to you later.